Hey folks, talking about the full moon in Aries, which is going to be happening on October 31st. And it's going to have a theme of correcting our mistakes and of sort of checking our impulsive nature. The nakshatra of Bharani is important, which I'm going to explain. Um, in addition to that, I do have, I wanted to put this up here as well, which is uh, I've been talking about this group of classes that you can get from my website. It's free. You can just click the link. I'll put the link in the, oops, that's not what I meant to put. Sorry. This is someone who just emailed me, and I was meant to email him back. So, hi, Cameron Smith. Funny. Okay, so this is the link if you want to click it, where you can get the classes. It's actually 4.5 hours of free classes on Vedic astrology, and even see if getting certified in Vedic astrology is something for you that you would be interested in doing. This group of classes is really excellent in organizing all of the information. People get a lot of information now and they don't really know how to organize it very well. So this really takes you through it. And you can get, again, hours of professional training, 4.5 hours. First video is on, it's actually like an entire mind map where you could see the whole kind of system of astrology. The second video is about sacred astronomy and the ancient texts. Then I break down the different principles and frameworks that you need to know, that you need to understand. Then I get into different principles, methods, and outcomes. The difference between the different details and whatnot, then how to organize those details, then how to use those organized details to make predictions, then how to prioritize and sequence all of that, and then how to research and do different case studies and whatnot. So this is something that you can avail yourself of if you're interested. And again, it's free. You just go to that website and enter your email address, and you can get the classes. So we have this full moon that's happening in Aries. It's happening on October 31st, which is, of course, also in America. I think in other parts of the world too. I'm not sure. It's also called Halloween, right? Halloween, where we dress up and do all that stuff, which probably we're not going to be doing a lot of it this year because of COVID. But you see that on this full moon, what we have here is the sun is at 14 degrees of Libra and the moon is at 14 degrees of Aries. So this is the opposite point, where the moon is opposite the sun, and because the sun is in that sign of Libra, we're putting a lot of emphasis on that area of life right now, because the sun is there and it's lighting up everyone from that position. So, for example, with the sun going through Libra, that means if you're Aquarius, for example, that's a 9th house cycle for you. If you're Gemini, that's a 5th house cycle. If you're Taurus, that's a 6th house cycle, because the sun is in the 6th house from Taurus, for example. So this month keeps recurring all the time. This is the cosmic month, the true solar month in an astrological, cosmological sense, not relative to the calendar, which are just calendar dates. The calendar dates are to just help us navigate like seasons and whatnot. But the cosmological month is to help you navigate your karma. And these lunar days, what are called tithis, happen every day. Every day is a new tithi. As you can see here, on this particular day, on October 31st, it says Shukla Purnima, which means waxing 15th day. If we go back one day earlier, it says Shukla Chaturdashi, which is waxing 14th day of the moon. Because every day we measure the moon and its relationship to the sun, how far it's moved away from the sun. It doesn't even have anything to do with the zodiac sign when you're looking at the tithi. You're just measuring how far the moon has moved from the sun. So what we do when we examine it the way I'm examining it here is we're taking that angle between the sun and the moon, which on October 31st, that angle is called Purnima, which is a full moon, which means the earth is in between the sun and the moon. And we're taking that lunar phase, that tithi, and saying which zodiac sign it's in and which nakshatra it's in. As we look up in the sky, we see, okay, it's not just Purnima, the 15th lunar day, it's also in the sky, it's in the Rashi, or the portion of sky called Aries. And again, that portion of sky doesn't change. It's always Aries because the zodiac signs are pinned to the nakshatras in Vedic astrology. Again, there's no debating this. It's in every text. People who aren't doing that are free to do it, but they're not doing the astrology that came out of India. That's not a debatable point. We have the texts already. It's not like you can change that. Every text, Aries and Ashwini, if you're doing Indian astrology, that's how they were measuring the sky. That was the first thing they said in the books. There's Ashwini, and the Rashis align with the nakshatras. That's it. Issue is decided. There's no Vedic astrology books that say there's Ashwini, but then the zodiacs, but then the signs begin on the vernal equinox. No, simply doesn't happen. So when we're looking at these full moons and new moons, we're taking that angle between the sun and the moon, and then we're saying, okay, when you look up at the moon, it's full, that's the tithi, and it's in this portion of sky called Aries, and this nakshatra, the smaller portion, called Bharani. So we take all that into account. The first thing is, where's the sun? Because that's that main focal point, like I just explained. The sun is in Libra. Now the moon has moved it's separated from the sun. Now it's completely opposite, and we're trying to integrate that opposite lesson, because that's what the lunation chart is. This opposite chart, or this opposite tithi, is with the sun in Libra and the moon in Aries. This is the lesson that we're integrating. We're integrating those qualities of Libra, which are about honoring other people's wishes equal to our own, which is the Libra. And the full moon brings in that opposite point, which is Aries, which is my individuality is important. My focus is important. So that is what we're talking about when we do full moons. Okay. And that's the focus of this. So within this Libra cycle of learning to compromise, learning to harmonize our energy with others, which is where the sun is, the full moon is saying, yes, but in order to do that, in order to compromise and to have a healthy compromise and to feel good about aligning my individuality with another person, I need to connect with my individuality, which is Aries. And so this is why full moons and new moons have a lot of have a quality of the extremes in them. The full moon is where the sun is always bright, because the sun is always bright, but then the moon is at its brightest as well. So there's an extreme, there's a pulling going on. Sun in Libra is saying, my focus is on compromising. Full moon in Aries is saying, but I need to know who I am first. But my individuality is important. And the moon is the feeling, it's the emotion. So the way to also understand it is that when the sun and moon came together, which, by the way, at the beginning of this cycle, the sun and moon came together at the very end of Virgo, but then the sun quickly moved into Libra. But when sun and moon came together, it created an extreme from there. Then the moon moves away from it. So as we're learning this idea about service, compromise, humility, listening to other people, paying attention to them, that's the lesson we've been trying to learn for the last couple weeks. The frustration starts to mount because it's like, well, I'm compromising. But what do I really feel? What are my feelings about the whole thing? Because again, the moon is the feelings. What are my feelings about all this compromise? How does it feel? And in this case, this full moon in Aries shows I might be feeling a little bit irritated about it. Okay, I'll compromise with you, but are you appreciating me also? I'm trying to compromise. Do you appreciate it? Do you value it? Do you value the concessions that I'm willing to make? So this is what we can be experiencing a lot with this full moon in Aries. As the full moon in Aries gets closer, and especially, on the day before, on the 14th and 15th Tithis, which is the 30th and the 31st, we might really feel a sort of mounting frustration with not feeling appreciated for our attempts and our efforts to compromise with other people. I see people are making comments. I'm got too much to do, so I'm not sure I'm going to get the comments. So people saying, "Hey Sam, question," or whatever. I'm just going to stay focused, okay? So we have to, really introspect and reflect about how it feels to compromise with other people. And we could feel that sort of mounting frustration as we get closer to the full moon in Aries, and particularly, again, the 30th and the 31st, once the moon goes into Aries. Let me go back. This is the 31st, but even on the 30th, which is on Friday, the moon is, Friday and Saturday, these are the 2 days. Even as the moon goes into Aries on Friday, like around the middle of the day, we'll start to feel like some frustration come up. Because again, it's also Aries. And it's full moon, so we're full of that emotion. Again, the moon is our sort of collective emotions. So we're going to be full of that bright, like, I feel this way now. So we could be quite triggered Friday and Saturday and Sunday, because the moon will also be in Aries on Sunday. So this upcoming weekend, we're going to have this full moon in Aries. It's going to be in its culmination on Saturday, the 31st. But again, you want to understand, and the reason that I talk about the reason I talk about it in contrast to the Libra principle is because everything is originating with the sun. We can't forget, astrologically, in many ways, the sun, and especially on a cosmological level, this is why they put so much importance on the sun, is because the sun isn't just one of the objects in the sky. It's the king. It's the main one. And this is why they have an entire way of measuring the Earth going around the sun, which is literally now it's been conflated with the tropical zodiac, but that's not. Zodiac is how we measure objects in the sky. The reason people are so confused about zodiacs, or the reason there are two calculations, is because of the sun. Because the sun is the only object that we measure twice. We measure the sun two different ways. The first way is with the calendar. That's what the calendar is. It's measuring us going around the sun. It has nothing to do with astrology. So keep this clear. It has nothing to do with astrology. In India, they call it the Sayana chakra, the circle with the ayana, and it groups all of these things that have to do with us going around the sun. It has nothing to do with any other planet. It doesn't even have anything to do with the moon or anything. And our entire year and our months and our calendar is totally based on the Earth going around the sun. That's the only thing it considers. Because we're going around the sun, we're not going around any other planet. So wherever we are in relationship to the sun is always going to be the most important cycle of the year, or at that time of the year. So this shows up in all the Indian festivals and everything else, is where we are in relationship to the sun. How we understand that astrologically is what sign the sun is in, because that's how we measure where we are in our orbit around the sun. Because not only are we orbiting the sun, but we see the sun moving through the sky, from our point of view, just like we see the other planets moving through the sky. So that's why we measure it twice, because we also have to measure all the other objects going through the sky. And we measure that with the zodiac. So the zodiac is measuring the objects moving through the sky. The calendar is measuring us going around the sun so that we can align with the seasons and whatnot. But when we want to align with those cycles on a cosmological level, cosmology and consciousness and karma, that's when we bring in the astrological part, and we use the zodiac and all of the astrological factors to determine that. So again, this was clear, and the Indians understood this clearly from all the way back. Those two things weren't mixed at all. By the way, what happened later is the reason they started to use the calendar calculation as the zodiac calculation is simply because it's the most stable. It makes it stable. But that stability comes at a price. I'm not going to get into all that in this explanation, because this is just about the full moon. But you should understand that's how it happened, because if we want to know exactly where do we start the zodiac circle. So they picked an astronomical event like the vernal equinox and say, okay, we'll start Aries at this point, because other than that, we're not exactly sure where the exact line is. So you want to understand, though, that wherever the sun is, that's the most important part of any cosmological month, any soli lunar month, as it's called in the Vedas, and in cosmic time. And this whole quality of the Panchanga here, this is called the Panchanga, all of these calculations down here, Ashwini, Shukla Purnima, Friday, blah, blah. These are all part of just measuring the sun, or, the Earth going around the sun and the sun's relationship to the moon primarily. So we're going to be very full of our psychology of Aries, that Aries fired up nature. And we're going to be very full of that. Like, okay, I'm full of this. I'm full of this emotion. That's why when we get the full moon, we're full of it. And what happens is actually in our consciousness, the Purusha and the Prakriti, the sun and the moon matrix within us, gets built up and fully developed. And by the time we reach the full moon, all of the five elements, the five organs of action, and the five organs of wisdom are all developed in our consciousness. What we're supposed to do with that is connect it with God, with the divine purpose, which I'm going to talk about in a minute with the Aries Bharani principle. But we're fully developed within. Our Purusha and Prakriti are fully developed. The sun is always bright, and the moon is also fully bright at that time. So it's full God and full goddess at that time. So there's a pull that's going on, but within that, there's also enormous power for our consciousness to connect with our highest spiritual potential. And at this time, it's around those Aries qualities, which is rather than to be irritated and frustrated about the emotion and the frustrated emotion of Aries, which again, Aries is experiences frustration when we feel like we're not important enough, or we're not the strong one, or we're not being recognized, or we're not winning, or we're not, again, the powerful one. Aries is where we want to feel also autonomous. Autonomy is a huge thing with Aries energy. Nobody tells me what to do. Again, that's Mars and Aries energy. I decide what I do. You see, that's exactly opposite of Libra, where Libra can be saying, okay, I'll do whatever you want because I want connection. And again, this is the overall cycle that we're in right now with the sun going through Libra. We're trying to find connection. We're very aware of how in the past and maybe even recently we've been breaking connection a lot. Our frustrations, we're realizing we have been the last few weeks of how maybe irritable and frustrated we are with the world, and so how we've been nasty and cutting and harsh. With the sun in Libra, we're trying to correct that, and we're saying, okay, I could be more compromising here. I haven't been my highest self there. I haven't been as humbled as I could be, with other people's ideas, because the sun is in Libra. So we've been trying to do that for the last few weeks and trying to have much more tolerance, forgiveness, compromising nature with others, right? That's what we've been trying to do for the last few weeks, the last 2 weeks. But now as the moon gets closer to the full moon in Aries, we're thinking, well, wait a minute, though. Here I am trying to accommodate you, and you don't care. You don't even appreciate my willingness to compromise. This is the most important part when you get a full moon. When you get the full moon here, it's always in relation to the other thing, because it's the moon and it's the feeling, and the feeling refers back to where the sun is. Whereas if it's opposite, if it's the sun in Aries and the moon in Libra, full moon in Libra, it's a different dynamic that comes first. This is the dynamic that's in response to the compromise. So what you may be noticing is that feeling a sort of frustration for those compromises that you're willing to make, those accommodations that you're willing to put forth, and not feeling or noticing how it's appreciated. So again, it doesn't necessarily even mean that you get angry about it or something externalized. What it often can show, and in fact, in the highest sense, is Aries is also, again, because it's ruled by Mars, it can be very cutting, and we need to cut things out. Mars is where we're willing to destroy something and break connection, hopefully without anger, because it's the anger part that makes us lose. But we can break connection in a very compassionate way just because it's a waste of time and a waste of energy. And be like, you know what? No. Hang on a second. Let me take a drink. So rather than feeling angry and frustrated about certain compromises or whatnot, we can also just be if we're already strong within ourselves, we don't have to get that kind of irritation over it, especially at the other people. The real thing that flips the switch, though, is this. If your identity and your sense of feeling good about yourself is derived from the other person's approval, and if you're waiting for the other person to appreciate all you've done, and you're waiting for a little kind of merit badge validation for all you've been willing to do, that's your problem, not theirs. You're doing that. Right? And again, the reason I say this is because if someone has a healthy relationship with Aries and Mars, a healthy relationship with all of that stuff is not looking for that validation in order to feel strong within themselves. Again, Parashara says Mars gives strength, And strength means that your strength is derived from you, from your truthful identity, and you're willing to act with integrity. And you act with integrity, which includes breaking connection at times or in situations where your integrity is about to get run over, or ideas that are worth defending and fighting for, you're willing to defend them. See, when we don't have integrity and when we start resenting people is when we're unclear about all of that stuff. And then it's very easy for us to be manipulated, to be shamed, to be guilted into things, and then to want to go back to someone else to try to convince them to get their approval that, no, really, I'm okay. Really, I'm nice. And then they don't appreciate it. And then we get angry because we try to convince them that we're good or whatever it is. The origin of that whole messed up interaction is the lack of integrity around that Mars energy to begin with. And the way to build up that Mars energy is those spiritual practices that strengthen Mars, which are literally things like yoga. Yoga is great. Mars is the yogi. But even before we start doing yoga, even just things that make us physically stronger. Think of how much better you feel when you're able to, again, do some kind of, like, overcome some sort of physical limitation. Because what happens when we overcome a physical limitation and then an emotional or psychological one is we're willing to endure the difficulty that it takes to overcome it. Like, let's say something like a diet, like losing weight. That's a great one when it comes to Mars because it requires discipline, focus, and the end of it, we feel stronger because, again, we feel better and we look better. That's part of it. But the thing that really teaches us is that we have the mental toughness to sacrifice our pleasure and comfort in the moment, which is Venus, in order to do what we know is right. That we're able to meet the challenge with courage and, again, sacrifice momentary pleasure and happiness in order to be strong. And that's what strength is in Mars, in the Mars equation. The Mars-Venus opposition is this opposition between feeling happy in the moment and enjoying life, which is Venus, and feeling strong, which is Mars. So when we're in control of that whole exchange, then we're willing to sacrifice some pleasure and happiness in the moment to do what we know is right. And when we're not good at that, then we don't have the strength ourselves to sacrifice in the moment for what we know is right. And so what happens instead is we get frustrated and then we make other people wrong for our lack of integrity. So when we're strong, we're able to suffer in the moment for our principles. And when we're weak, we make other people suffer for our lack of integrity. We make other people suffer for our principles. And this includes things like in relationships, for sure. Because the easiest thing to do is to just compromise with someone. If you want to be happy all the time, there's an easy way to do it. Just don't have any principles and just agree to everything everybody wants. And everybody will like you. And you'll like them for a while. And then one day you'll blow up and hate them. And you'll blame them for your blow up because you've compromised all these things. And then one day in your mind, you feel like you're doing all this compromising and they're not appreciating it. So you explode at them for what you have done. You made all those compromises. They didn't. You did. So this is a big thing in the Aries-Libra. The Aries-Libra polarity is huge, especially in relationships. It's much harder to maintain that integrity in the moment because people are always compelling you to slide on your principles and slide on what you know is right. And you want to slide on it because you want to maintain connection, which is Venus. Venus is the part of us that wants to be connected, that wants to be happy with other people, especially it gets harder. It's easier to do the diet than it is to, wean ourselves off of a person who we like, but who is really undermining our values or integrity or something like that. So this is especially a huge transit as it relates to relationships and relationship compromise and being engaged that way. And to really introspect about how much you actually are, I would say, to blame, but I don't necessarily like using the terms to blame, but that's really what it is, for your interactions. It's not the other person's fault. Only you can disrespect yourself. Only you can allow yourself to be disrespected. There's no reason to get angry even if someone does disrespect you. You know, I've definitely had a few of these scenarios come up lately with a few friends that I have who, you know, it's interesting how a few things have come up lately with some sort of minor interactions that I had with some people that were quite disrespectful from my point of view several months ago. And I'm having to interact with these people, with a few of these people again right now. And I'm noticing myself how I'm having to not be nasty toward them. And I'm not, because I authentically don't get angry when someone is frankly rude. I had a friend who just handled a situation very rudely and cut something off in a very rude way when they didn't really need to do that. It was a little misunderstanding. Frankly, they were wrong about the misunderstanding as well. But the way they handled it was very rude at the time. And at the time, it bothered me. It mainly hurt my feelings because I thought we were friends more than we are. And I considered them a friend, and I wouldn't have handled it that way. There's 100 more diplomatic ways to express something than the way this person did, with just some blatant accusation and then cutting something off. Now I'm having to interact with them again. And I'm having to, and now this person wants me to accommodate them in a certain way. And I'm like, and I really checked in about it. I'm like, no, I'm not going to accommodate this. And it's not because I'm trying to get revenge upon them, which it's actually not. It's because it's an inconvenience to my schedule. But the truth of the matter is, I would have been inconvenienced in this way before they acted like that. Because I would have been willing to be inconvenienced that way because they were my friend. And I would be inconvenienced. And by the way, I allowed myself to be inconvenienced the entire time that we were engaged because of the fact that I like this person as a friend. It's another man. And I allowed myself to be inconvenienced before because they were my friend. But then when they acted that way, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. And when they got back in touch with me, they wanted to engage the same way that we did before. And I was like, no, I don't want to do it like that anymore. This is better for me. And I could feel they were like, well, why would you say that? That was okay with you before. They didn't say it, but I if they would have, I would have said, well, it was okay with me before because I thought we were friends. And I didn't mind being inconvenienced before, but now I don't really feel like that. I don't think you handled that very well. It didn't come to that, but I would have told them that. But anyway, so these are things, and again, honestly, I'm not angry about it. I'm not angry at the person about it, and I could have the conversation if I felt like it was worth it. I don't feel like it's really worth it because it's not that big of a deal. I'm explaining this to you, though, because this is the whole Venus-Mars thing, the way it goes. It could easily have been where I could have exploded at them when the initial thing happened, or gotten angry at them and argued with them and fought with them because they were not polite, at least not by my standards. This is the other thing to also understand. These are your standards that we take our standards and apply them to everyone else. My standard of politeness is not some universal truth. It's my standard, but it's also important. So I don't blame them as a horrible person because the way they expressed themselves wasn't the way I would have done it. But it also didn't mean that I felt like engaging with them anymore. I was like, that was rude, and it was rude. It was rude to just make an accusation with no diplomacy. It was very rude to my feelings, which I wouldn't have done to them. There's 50 other ways to say it, and they didn't bother with any of it. They just cut something off and said, it's because you did this, and that was it. And I'm like, all right, I get it. So I'm not going to make a bunch of accommodations now. That's what this person is, and that's fine. I'll meet them at that level. That's where it is, and that's where it is with me. So I just sort of cut it out. And then when I had to deal with them again, I'm like, okay, no, I'm not making this accommodation. Here's what we're going to do. So, and it works out, and I have to deal with them next week over this. But it's these are the kind of issues. And again, if I wasn't clear within my Mars and my Venus, definitely in other times in my life, I would have gotten into a full argument with this person. I would have accused them. I would have got my feelings hurt. Again, I would have had a big argument with them over it. And it's because I got my feelings hurt. It hurt my feelings the way they handled that. I wouldn't have expressed it that way. I would have been angry at them. And I would have made them wrong for my principles and my values. And you shouldn't do it this way. You should have done it the way I think you should have done it. And I would have been wrong because they would maybe didn't intend it that way at all. Maybe they're just bad communicators, which frankly, as I've lived my life, I think this is one of the biggest problems that people have. Most people are just bad communicators. They don't realize the way they're communicating things. And they don't actually mean any harm by all of the horrible ways in which they communicate, which we communicate with each other. They don't even get how it comes across. We're just getting flip and making some accusation and being done with it. They think, oh, what? Well, what's wrong with that? Well, nothing. If you don't want to preserve any kind of connection with a person, there's nothing wrong with it. If you want to be a friend with someone, that's not the way you communicate about something where there was nobody did anything to you. So as I've gotten older, I've sort of mellowed a bit and understand this. I see this in myself. And so this is a big part of the Libra Aries dynamic. And so, again, you can notice in your life how the last few weeks you've been noticing and really checking in about how well you accommodate others, how well you compromise, how willing you are to be changed in your opinions and ideas, and you're trying to be expanded in that way. But again, the next few days, it's going to lead more to maybe some frustration, maybe boiling over with these things. And again, the most immediate and hot versions of this is our romantic relationships, certainly, if not, or also family, any place where we have a real intimate engagement with another person. It could be business relationships and whatnot as well. The more intimate and intense the interaction, the more polarized is there, the more polarity is there. Like the reason that the situation I'm talking about with this friend, the reason it was hurtful. Again, it wasn't hurtful for a long time. It was disappointing because I felt something die. Like he destroyed something there. And we're friends. We've been friends for several years. And like, why would you be so thoughtless? Like, don't you realize, like, this is it was shocking, really. It's kind of just a little bit of sadness for it, but you go on, and but those kinds of, if it wasn't someone who was a friend who I hadn't hung out with quite a lot and hadn't spent a lot of time with, then it doesn't bother me as much. So again, the more time we have invested in someone and the more we've gotten to know someone, the more intense these things get, because now we feel, I thought I knew you. I thought you were this way. And you don't communicate just like me. So the other thing about this is it's in the nakshatra of Bharani. And Bharani is that section of Aries. It comes after Ashwini. Hang on a second. It comes after Ashwini. Ashwini is the first section of Aries, which is symbolized by these two horses running fast. Horses are symbols of energy, forward momentum. You could just think of one horse, think of two horses, like pulling together. And they would yoke those horses, right, so that you get even double the speed. But you could also have the horses, two of them pulling in opposite directions. There's a lot of, even in the Bible and whatnot, there's examples of where, horses running in different directions, is very scattered as well, where you can maybe not go anywhere. In fact, just get pulled all over the place. That's the first part of Aries, is Ashwini, the need to really harness that energy in the mind as well. Otherwise, the mind is just pulled in all different directions, like horses galloping all over the place. And the horse is also a symbol of prana, or breath, and the energy in the breath, like pranayama, and controlling it and focusing prana. Right? By the way, you'll also notice Ashwini is opposite Swati Nakshatra, which also has a lot to do with breath and prana. These two nakshatras in Libra and Aries have a lot to do with that. Force, velocity, harnessing the energy of prana in a yogic, spiritual sense. So at that beginning of Aries and the horses and the prana, it's often quite scattered. And then the next nakshatra of Bharani, where we have this full moon, is related to Yama, which is literally, like I just said, prana, Ashwini, Yama is Bharani, to control that energy and harness the energy, because we feel this sense of this sort of scattered nature at the beginning of Aries. Then we need to concentrate it, and we become aware of the consequences and of the mistakes in Bharani. One of the great things about Bharani Nakshatra is this capacity to correct our mistakes and to to make adjustments, but we also become aware of these mistakes by the pain of feeling them. And again, this is one of the qualities, one of the parts of Aries that can be quite punishing. The god here, Yama, is one who is full of, heaviness and a feeling of punishment, a feeling of restraint, consequences that are not necessarily pleasant. So again, we can, Yama is the god, he's the ruler of Bharani, and he's the one who shows up at the moment of death and takes the soul to its destination. And the symbol of Bharani is the woman's reproductive tract, like ovaries and uterus and vagina, where a baby is born. First, it's where there's the pleasure of sort of penetrating life with all of our energy. Like, right? We enjoy it. Like that first part of Aries is like, yes, I'm active. And it's like, you can think of like your will penetrating almost like sexual. This nakshatra has a lot of sexuality with it. Bharani does. But look at what happens. Now we live in an era of birth control, but used to be, you had sex, you might have a baby. And there was not much that they did to stop it. It was, and even having the baby could kill you. Childbirth is dangerous business. Again, we live with modern medicine, but bringing another life out of your body is an intense thing. So you think about everything that is implied with that whole idea. The word Bharani also is the origin of the word bear, like to bear. Not a bear like an animal, but bearing the result. Even things like forbearance and having to bear something. Something that you've created. So again, this whole idea that once you create something, now you have to bear the result of that. Once you do something, you have to bear the result. This is also just as simple as the law of karma. This is all karma is. Karma is you do something, then the result comes back to you and you have to bear the result. And that's what teaches us in life. By bearing the result of what comes back to us. So you want to see this symbol here as a part of Aries as well, of the sign Aries. We have this impulsive energy that's the beginning of life. You can think of it like the sperm being shot out and then it meets the egg in botany, and the reproductive tract of the woman then creates a baby. Now we have to bear it. Now you got the baby. Now you need to take care of it. Now there's a whole level of karma that has happened because of what you did. So again, open up the field there. It's not just about a baby. It's about everything you do. Everything you do. All of your actions and your will creates a result that you have to bear. You have to bear that result. And that result that you have to bear is a restraint. It's a restriction. It's something that before you had to bear that, you were free of that. Now you have to bear that result. And it's usually what we become aware of in botany and in life even is the mistakes that we make that compel us to now have the courage to do something different. And again, this is also a quality of Aries, is to bear the result and then notice and be changed by it, and then have the courage to grow through it, and then have the forbearance to bear it well and learn from it and be aware of the consequences and harness the energy, which is the nature of yama, and to be restrained and not repeat the same mistakes, mainly because we don't want to bear that painful result again. But this is a big part of the full moon as well, is this back and forth. And again, as you can see, the sun is in Swati and the moon is in Bharani. Again, Swati is that prana that's very powerful, and Bharani is again bearing the result of that wavering, unpredictable mind and allotment of energy. So there's a lot here. And again, this full moon is to try to integrate those qualities of Libra. So the last thing to understand is that, we don't fully integrate any of these cycles until we integrate its opposite. This is why everything has a quality of its opposite folded into it. You don't really understand the Libra principle until you've integrated the Aries principle, and vice versa, and with everything where there's an opposite. The opposite is not really the opposite. It's just what you might call the shadow. Shadow is the big thing now. Everybody's into the shadow. We're all Jungian shadow people, right? This is probably the most shadow part of astrology. Is the opposite of something is not really its opposite. You might say it's like its shadow. I prefer to think of it as opposite because I get burnt on like the endless shadow that people talk about now. And especially now where everything is a shadow, everything we do is like a shadow projection of some kind of thing that we're doing. It's just a little bit much. But the way I explain it is integrating the opposite. Rather than it being shadow, I'd rather bring it into light. It's not shadow, it's light. Right? So we don't really integrate the Libra principle until we understand its opposite. Because again, the other thing is that the opposite has an action with it as well. And the action of Aries is, and you want to look at the polarity here. It's the polarity between Venus and Mars, which is, I want to be happy, but the way I'm happy is to make you happy. That's the Venus principle. My happiness can't be at your expense. That's the Venus principle. If my happiness comes at your expense, then I'm not happy. Particularly with Libra. That's more the Libra principle. If my happiness comes at your expense, then I'm not happy. The Aries principle is, I'm the one who decides who I am, what I do. And if I need to break connection in order to have integrity and personal strength, then I'm willing to do it. I don't necessarily want to do it, but if I have to, I need to be able to live with myself first before I can make any good agreement. So again, you understand how important this is. Because if you're already starting a Libra agreement with this idea that if my happiness comes at your expense, then I'm not happy. Well, that starts with I need to first know who I am, or every agreement is going to be a mess. And every agreement I have starts with who I am first. First, I have to know who is making the agreement. First, I have to make sure I'm not just doing it because I want to maintain connection, because I'm afraid of being alone, and I'm afraid that if I express who I really am, you're not going to like me, and blah, blah, blah. If that's the origin or the foundation of your agreement, you're already a mess. So all of your agreements are going to be just wackadoodle at that point. And again, this is why the Zodiac starts with Aries. There's also an entire evolution of consciousness through the Zodiac signs, and the first one is Aries. It is the first, which says, first of all, I need to know who I am before anything else is important. And if I don't, I'm going to be frustrated about everything, because now I'm looking all around for who I am and just getting frustrated that it's not coming the way I think it should, because I'm looking for it in the form of some validation externally. So this Libra Aries is being worked through. The polarity and the opposite is coming out. So again, on lunation cycle, on full moons and new moons especially, it's the extremes in that cycle. So underneath it all, there's as I said, this enormous promise of spiritual growth and development when we have the full moon. It's great for your meditation. And again, meditating, people say, well, what should I think about with the meditations? Meditation is an emptying. And I know there's a lot of astrologers and people that'll say, do this or think of that or meditate on this thing or whatnot. You don't hear me talk about that very much because I don't think it's really useful, frankly. These astrological indicators and ideas are enough to guide someone toward a specific deity. Again, your beloved deity or your beloved guru is the one you should be meditating on all the time. You should be doing spiritual practice all the time that is already based on that concept. It's already based on, again, that deity or that guru mantra or that sadhana, that spiritual practice. Only the ones who don't have a spiritual practice or sadhana even ask those questions because they don't have it and they're looking for it. So this is why I don't talk about those things. The most important thing is to connect to the heart, find the spiritual practices that you really love, and the deities or a guru or something that you love to do that connects you with that divine channel, and do that. You should do it all the time, not just on a full moon. And if you're on a full moon, what you'll find is that the energy gets much more concentrated. And it's going to be concentrated in the ways that I'm explaining because you're dealing with this kind of energy. And then this kind of energy is a launch pad for your sadhana and your spiritual practices. So this is what I'll say today. And I hope this was helpful for people to hear. And very important full moon, Libra Aries, is where there's a lot of energy charge going. And it's one of the biggest axes because it has so much to do with our relationships. Really good time to question these things. And I hope this was helpful for